Press start, Nick, and then make them follow.
It started now, so you just wait about 8 seconds and then you can go.
All right, good morning, everyone. I probably don't know if I count to 8 at the same time as other people or take longer, I'm not sure. So first, I'd like to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people as traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on today and recognise any other people or families with connections to the lands of the ACT and region. I want to acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contribution that they make to the life of this city and the region. And I'd like to acknowledge and welcome Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be attending today. So as normal, we're recording this, so publishing it on Bruce afterwards. I presume, Kirsten, we've got a few people online already. Do you know how many, approximately?
It'll be up on that screen at the top.
Yeah, okay, 126. So remind anybody who's not watching it, they can see it later. So thanks for joining us. So we've got our guest speaker today, Pat Howard, and Pat's currently the Executive General Manager of Strategy, Insights and Innovation at the Australian Sports Commission. Pat's got a background as an elite rugby player, having played for the ACT Brumbies, Leicester Tigers, and he had 20 caps for the Wallabies, where he followed in the footsteps of both his grandfather and his father. After his playing career, Pat successfully transitioned into coaching, where he took Leicester to a premiership title in 2007, before returning to Australia for a quite successful career in business. It was actually challenging to do the intro for this because there's so many things you could focus on with Pat, so just some highlights. He also took very high-profile sports administration positions with Rugby Australia and Cricket Australia. While at Cricket Australia, just a couple of highlights. Australia won the Ashes 5-0 in 2013-14 and 4-0 in 2017-18. Pat left Cricket Australia late in 2018 and continued a successful business career with tech company MSL Solutions. Pat's now responsible for management and oversight of the Australian Sports Commission's High Performance Group. Since he joined the Sports Commission back in May last year. Pat will be leading the Australian team in their preparation for Los Angeles Olympics in 2018 and Brisbane in 2032 for both Olympics and Paralympics, as I said. Also believe Pat's got some involvement in the commercial and strategic partnerships side of the Sports Commission, research and innovations, sports strategy and investment. So I met Pat recently. We both spoke at a sort of, it's one of those things that they have these strange names for these things, but it was called the Process Transformation and Continuous Improvement Roadshow. I thought Pat spoke really well about leadership at that, so hence I reached out to Pat straight away and asked if he could come and speak at the Institute, which I'm really glad he agreed to do. So welcome, Pat, and I think Pat's just going to give us some general reflections on leadership. And as you could see from the short bio I gave, he's got a lot of experience to draw on in doing so. But thank you.
Thank you very much. I had about 600 slides there to put up, and I'm not going to worry about putting them up, but I'm going to talk to the 2 slides that were there to start with, just to keep it nice and simple for how we can work together. We are on the same team, and it's nice to go to sport very quickly in team aspects, but we all talk teams, don't we? We're in the procurement team, or in a finance team or accounts payable team. We're all in teams, and essentially that's incredibly important in how we think. I think there are a couple of ways the Sports Commission are trying to work, and to get a basic idea of how we work, and there's a high performance lead. Her name's Maddie Clements. She's fantastic, and there's a community lead, a guy called Richard McInnes, and I sort of sit across both those to make sure the allocation of money doesn't go too far either way at any given time. There are 2 strategies for those areas, and I'm sure, like you, we've got a bucket full of strategies and corporate plans and documents and 10-year plans for the next 47 years that may not get actioned. And so we have all those same things. So making sense of, and you heard my title, there's strategies in there. The strategy, which is money. Where do we put our money for the best allocation? There's insights, go to data. This is where we had a procurement day. And then there's innovation, tech. And there's some really cool tech things. For those that you have ever we've got any sort of AFL or rugby league fans, and you've seen the GPS stuff, they all sit the catapult, that got invented a kilometre away. And that company, the market cap of that company is worth $490 million, and that was invented over there. Okay, and there have been lots of things like that over there. Now, the great challenge with those conversations sometimes is they are loss-making entities. And as you heard from my CV, basically, I was a footy player and a pharmacist. That's my background. I'm pretty happy in health. So my first degree was in pharmacy. I still own pharmacies today. I'll declare any bias or interest, any problems I've got. And then I effectively had a career of going C-suite listed entities and EGMs of sport. And that's my CV for the last 15, 16 years. And I've got MBAs and all those sorts of other things you can, you colour up your CV with. But experience more than anything is the thing that I have found that's been incredibly important. Going back to Sports Commission, I'll tie that back a little bit later. We've got effectively two strategies which I think are relevant to the talking to the team today. We have a play well strategy and a win well strategy. Going to Paris and the Olympics is all about the winning well. The 1% of all the people that play sport, we want them to be playing in the right spirit. And I think, there's been a real shift from 10, 15, 20 years ago where it's gold or nothing to, I'm really happy when we're talking about people getting personal bests. This is their first Olympics, and imagine what they'll be doing in the next Olympics. I think that dialogue is excellent, because for those pro sports which will dominate the conversation in Australia all the time, and just to be clear, there are more professional sports in Australia per capita than any other country in the world. We have more sports people than any other country in the world. So it's a real melting pot. So for us to have Olympians who get about 10 days coverage every 4 years is a real challenge for us. And when I mean us, I mean us. I mean us because we want people doing parkrun. We want people playing netball. We want people doing rock climbing. We want people getting out there and just doing ocean swimming. That's important stuff. That's important for health. It's important, yes, for high performance. I think it's huge for mental well-being. We all know that, and this is the pharmacist in me speaking, we can give people drugs, or we can get people out exercising and mixing with their mates. And the anecdotal studies say this one's actually pretty good. This is a really good response. And so for us at the Sports Commission, we're not just worried about the AIS is about the 1%ers. That's the win well. Do your best. Keep competing. We're okay with coming 5th or 6th or 4th. We're okay. You've got to be your best, though. You've got to try and do your best. That's important in life. I think on the other side, playing well, and this is going to be an interesting challenge. I reckon those of you in this room, that's about the 99% of people. And this is about, and I was really challenged early on when I turned up here, and I've got 4 kids. I had 4 kids under 4.5 of all my CV. That's my big one. So my wife tells me it was very difficult. So that's my easy joke. But no, it is, I have kids that play sport. And there are very much that view, and I'm sure you've all seen it. Is it a participation pathway for your 10 to 16-year-old kid, or is it actually a competition pathway? And I think a lot of the time the coaches and the parents think it's a competition pathway. And we want it to be a great experience. The only goal we care about is, did you have a great time? Did you turn up next year? Did mum and dad actually love seeing you involved? We will get great high performance outcomes if we keep people playing sport. That's our headspace. It's got to be a great experience. And my measure as a coach is not whether or not I came 1st or 10th. It's whether those kids turned up and played next year. The job of the sports is to keep them playing that sport. My job is to keep them playing any sport. Okay, one of my real worries, and this is old data, so I'd be really happy to be challenged on it, but there were a period there where kids were in drafts, and I'll take the AFL, and I knew this back in my days when I was working in cricket and high performance, that the kids that were in the draft and missed out on playing They weren't playing sport 3 years later. Not playing AFL, not playing sport, any sport. So we want to be able to work with all those big sports to go, we want to keep them involved because these are incredible athletes, male or female these days. Unlike 2000, the males and females were playing all that competition. So the dial has shifted there. So we want to keep, and this is all of us, keep them in playing sport. Because I'm looking in this cohort, I reckon I've got some parents in the room. Okay? I'm just having a look at you and I'm looking, you look younger than me, which is cool. But that's the real challenge for us as a collective at the Sports Commission. That's what we're trying to lead. And we believe that is a shift. On the play well, if we keep people playing sport, the high performance people, when we get into 2032, they're going to be bowled over with the amount of talent because we have a healthy country. We have an active country. We have overall, we have a climate. I live in Brisbane, like now. We have a climate. Yeah, I'm boasting today. I have lived here. I played for the Brumbies. I love Canberra. We're all sweet. Okay. Not picking a fight. But my wife made me move back. But that is our ability to be able to try and drive that. So that's a little bit of a pitch of the Sports Commission, how we work with you guys. Bernice, you've been on calls with me before. And trying to get that message from us to the organisations down. Leadership, I'll just go a little bit to that. And I do believe leadership makes a difference. There's parts of being pragmatic and there's parts of sticking to the rules. There's times where you have to have courage. So I'll go to, everyone know what Sandpaper Gate is? Okay. I was in charge when Sandpaper Gate happened. Okay. And I ran, and by the end of it, captain got sacked, I sacked him. The vice captain got sacked, I sacked him. The coach was moved on. The CEO got moved on. Eventually, they got me as well. And so that's all cool. So the great consequence of all of that is I don't have any fear. None. So I don't care if I get sacked tomorrow. I've been in and out of jobs all over the place. The next job, I sold for $120 million company. I'm sweet. Okay? So that was the net result of such a negative experience. I sold a $120 million company. So we're all good. So the great news is you don't have to fear things and change. That's my headspace. You've got to be ethical. You've got to be reasonable. You've got to be able to deal with the bullies that you're going to have at times, but you've also got to have a go. Because you're allowed to make mistakes. That's all right in life. I'm really happy to take some questions here at the end of this, but Sandpaper Gate's a really interesting thing. Whereas I'll contrast two very difficult leadership roles in cricket. One was the death of Phil Hughes. Does people remember that? I was in charge for that. Okay. And that's nearly 10 years ago today. And Sandpaper Gate. Death of Phil Hughes was a really complicated, difficult, unprecedented thing in that sport. Happens in a lot in other sports. Equestrian has deaths, cycling has deaths. They have a lot more deaths. But cricket, this is very unique to them. But you're having to manage change because they're playing against India, and culturally in India, death is dealt with very differently. Versus then you've got having to recut a schedule and trying to work with your players. You have the time and the gulf between the Australian players and other players and the families, and it was complex. Sandpaper is really simple. One bloke got to another bloke, scratch a ball. And there was a sanction on it. We increased the sanction. Done. That was it. So one was really actually easy, but you had to deal with the media. The other one, it was really complicated. Your ability to see through the grey and what is your pragmatic answer on that, for me, is the leadership bit. Because when you sit in the pointy end of roles, all of you are going to come up with great ideas. And your job and your difficulty and your challenge as you go up is the decision making becomes more and more grey. Not ethically grey. Ethics is fine. It's actually what is a little bit more important than this other little bit thing that's a little bit more important. Because you've only got a certain amount of resource to be able to make those things work. Now, that's not just dollars resources. It's people resources. You've only got your 40 hours a week or so. And every time you spend half an hour in a meeting that you shouldn't be spending in, that's a half an hour you're not spending with your family at home. And I have I'm a big believer in that. Let's have shorter meetings, get it done, move it, fix it, make that decision. Because as you've heard, if that decision's slightly wrong, we can come back and we can revisit, and we can make a change. And as long as you get those decisions right and you be willing to concede and be humble enough to go, yep, wasn't quite right, let's move on. We were in the AS Arena yesterday. We had a big day out, 2,500 people. Fantastic, great day. Nice, cute was the word, cute. Cute day. And there was a lot of panic in the lead out, and I just kept driving it through because I knew we had to start with something. We had to open the door up to be willing to make mistakes, to improve, to get better. My leadership view is always about trying to start with something, give people an option, and I'm really happy to take a few bullets at that stage to take on that challenge, to then have a look at how do we get better. The really crucial stuff in life, and this is the leadership challenge, is knowing what's going to be really, really, really important. You can't have a mistake on, which is, look, if we get that one wrong, it's not going to be too bad. We can revisit that, retry and get things done. As you move up different positions, as you move to different organisations, as you've heard, I've worked in lots of different places. I believe life is about creating great experiences. I'd never worked in government before. So guess what? I went, righto, let's give this a go. That was literally my attitude when I signed up a year ago. I'm coming to have a go. And then I'll do that, and then I'm going to go and try something else. And that's okay too. I am an expert in sport. I know sport really, really well across lots and lots of different industries. Do I know government? Not at all. Zero. And I'm learning. And I'm really lucky to be on meetings where I'm learning with people. But on those meetings, I go to my area of expertise and go, the sports think like this. They're going to think we're idiots if we do this. But Vanessa Bennett calls me all the time, you can't say that. So, but hopefully that gives a little bit of insight in how I believe. Like, if I take those two big, what were very public issues, the Phil Hughes death and Sandpaper Gate, in between there, yep, won an Ashes with the men, won an Ashes with the women, won a World Cup with the men, won a World Cup with the women. I've won Bledisloes as a player, I've won European Cups as a coach. I've had a great time. And so when you put it all together, you don't remember the little crappy things that happened in between, whenever they were. And my only advice to people is that little bit, you've only got to stretch yourself within your capability. I know if I had this conversation with my wife, she will go, I'm not doing that. She's far more risk averse than I am. In saying that, I'm at the same stage. There are parts of my life that I don't gamble, full stop, hate it. So there are parts of you don't have to be black and white in any way of your personal life versus your professional life. But I believe we are here to make a difference. We are here not to keep the seat warm. And if we're going to actually try and go home to your wife or your partner or your family in a week and go, how did you go? Well, I like people being able to look back at the end of their 6 months, 3 months, 12 months, 8 years, and go, this is what I got done over that period of time. Even though you won't remember the 2 or 3 failures or mess ups or sprays that you get from a boss in that time because you had a go. So they're my general leadership philosophy bits. I'm really happy to take questions on anything. If you want to talk to me about David Warren and Steve Smith, happy to do so. I've been across lots of different organisations. I can talk to you where we are with sport right now. The $178 million that went into these sports. I'm happy to talk to you about how those processes go, because that decision making affects people and affects sports and how they're going to make decisions. And it'd be really interested how you guys feel about what sports are funded, what are underfunded, what you see is coming. To leave you with a last thought, in 2000, when we went to the Sydney Olympics and even Athens and Tokyo were our big 17 gold medals at both those. They're our biggest two of all time. Let's park Tokyo. There were some unique COVID type things. We're all having fun during the... So let's take Athens. In the lead up to that, there were none of the professional women's sports that we have today. None. We're going to go to 2032. We will have a professional women's AFL team that's a competition that's growing, professional NRLW that's growing. We'll have Super W women's rugby that will be growing. We'll have A-League soccer that's growing. And they are all probable athletes that could be Olympians. Now, of the 12 golds we've won, how many of the blokes won? Nice. Thanks for robbing us of one. There's a couple of ones up the back. But, you know, that's a really interesting thing that we're going to have to think about. How do we make sure we continue to grow everything? And I'd love to work with all those big sports and those great athletes. How do we continue to open up? And to be fair to them, you know, I'll give you Maddie Levi, who was highest try scorer in the women's sevens. She was playing AFLW only a couple of months ago. So we can work together, and be able to present together is a great opportunity for all of us. I say that between the sports, I say that between the government organisations, I say that, you know, collectively about how we work together as Australians. I love that concept because as much as we get special in our teams of accounts payable, finance, in the end, they'll know the AIHW, they'll know the government. In the end, how we present as Australians is probably the greatest measure that we can have at the end. Happy with that as a start? Did I cover my remit?
Yes.
Right.
Thank you. Thanks, Pat. We've got some people online. I'm not quite sure if anyone submitted a question because I can't see my...
You want to come see it?
I don't want to...
Come and join me.
Yes, I come join you. Okay, so we do have some requests. Just general. So I might, Matthew, unless you have a question.
Can I get a thumbs up? Wow.
Okay, so I've actually got a question. It's an economics question. How do you sell or how do you engage an Australian public where there's cost of living pressures and you're investing in high performance sport, where some people are making the sacrifice, unable for their children to participate in sport? What's the strategy to...
I think there's two aspects to that. So I think you will all empathise that if there's an Australian athlete... Bonjour, ça va? Voilà. So of the cost of living pressures, I'm going to park that for a second. I'll come back to it because there are some good schemes going on, but I agree it's expensive. I think the other side of this is getting direct athlete funding, both from the government, but also we all heard the Gina Reinhart type stories, all that sort of thing. So we like, you know, our best medalists going around Australia don't earn what you earn. Okay, they're under the minimum wage, so I know that they don't earn what you earn. So I don't think anyone begrudges those people who are spending a significant amount of time supporting them. And it is means tested. They start earning more, they don't get any. So I think that bit is a good spend of our money, and I actually am very, very supportive of that. I think the next bit around this is why there's a play well and a win well strategy, more money into more people playing sport. And I think correlating that not only with traditional sport, but also the ability to, you know, so many of any cyclists or, you know, your 5K park run type people or, you know, swimming, going down to your local, the non-organised thing. And I think we're going to have to get more relaxed about less structures. So one of the things we are saying to the sports and what's happening around the world is the sporting season, they keep trying to stretch it to go longer, and as a consequence, cost more. And we're saying go shorter. You know, have a sample different sports. Let your 12-year-old play hockey, then do touch, then go and have a sport climbing, and then go kayaking. And go and have a couple of touches of lots of different sports and try lots of different things. By the time they're 16, 17, they'll have fallen in love with something, and that's great. And you don't have to sign up for some of that. And that's where you want to sample, be active, and pick your sport. I think there are two things we are trying to do for the cost of the sports. Travel has gone up significantly, so we're trying to work with some of the sports. There's a trial going on right now about whole of government sports, so we can, as soon as we drop the price of their costs, they can drop the cost to the participant. And also insurance has gone through the roof for these sports. So once again, we're trying to collate those and drop those prices back. The only reason, because there's only two real sources of income for the 100 sports we look after. There's 4 big sports that have got a lot of money and they've got media rights or they've got gambling money or they've got whatever. That's how they drive it. Then there are 5 that are caught in the middle. And this is basketball, rugby, netball, golf, etc. And then there's 91 that pretty much rely on 2 income sources. Us us, taxpayer, us, and the user. And if we can drop the cost to them, they can drop the income back to the participant. There's also great schemes going on in different states at the grassroots level. I know that. Queensland's got one at the moment, but I know there's a fair few others going on. So it's a well and truly known process. It's important we start dropping those back because it is a problem. Norway, who have 95% participation rate, make it free for people to participate up to the age 18. Now, the Norwegian fund is obviously driven out of oil out of the North Sea, so let's deal with all sorts of... No life's perfect, but, there are good models around the world we can drop and try and make life a little bit easier. But I understand that's a real problem because, we'll end up having the elite of the elite being all our Olympians or whatever else, and those that struggle to do that, we don't want to exclude anyone in sport. And I think it's really important.
We have any online, but we do have Matthew.
So thanks, Pat. Interesting talk and a lot of great learnings there. I'm mostly a league fan, although I like football or soccer as Australians insist on calling it. But one of the things you hear about league coaches talk about now is you have to work with younger people differently than you did in the past. The sort of cliched way it's articulated is 20 years ago you could give players a bake or hop into them and a lot of them would say, get upset and I'll prove you wrong. And now you have to communicate differently with younger people, although I suspect that really it's about communicating differently to different people, and the best coaches seem to do that. So I guess the question is, are you seeing that generational change, and reflecting on your own sporting career, have you seen that? And how do you think that sort of leadership in senior sports role has evolved, if at all?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting... I love the click. Oh, it's an interesting question. No, it's actually a really good question because dealing with any population base of any group is homogenous and everybody's exactly the same, and I'm going to deal with everybody exactly the same because they were born in 1994, that's ridiculous. So there are certain, I'll use two examples of cricketers, which might be nice and easy. David Warner, if you told him that he couldn't do something, he wasn't good enough, he would go and score 200. Literally, we sent him away from an Ashes tour after he had a fight with Joe Root and said, mate, you've got to go away and score 200 to get on the next Ashes tour. He literally went out, got 200 and then chipped it back to the bowler just to prove a point that I got exactly 200. With Nathan Lyon in these very early days, and Nathan's knowledge conference only from up the road here, and he was a guy that I remember the sports psych was talking to the national selector who was mid-70s, John Imberity, and he's going, I just can't believe he can't react. And he said, John, you've never given him any belief in his own skills that you back him. And so the new selector came in and said, mate, I'm guaranteeing you these next 5 tests. You are our guy. We believe in you. You are the best bowler by all the numbers. Shane Warne's the best league. You're the best off-spinner of all time. You will be a bowler. And he rose and, got player of the series. And I think when we manage people, when we manage our relationships, when we manage those that you work up, back and sideways, what's their lens? Yes, this next generation, in many respects, I think are more resilient. They're used to social media. They're used to publicly being criticised, and that is a very hard... I first played for Australia when I was 19. I was heavily criticised. I got dropped after my first test. And it was a really difficult time for a day or two. But I believe you learn from that. Now, I think this generation know how to deal with criticism. They also seem to, at different times, there are certain people you could really drive hard and you'll get a great response. There are other people that, you're going to have to, mate, I believe in you. You're fantastic. You've done a great job here. And that's a confidence build, and that's your leadership journey. I don't believe people over the thousands of years have changed, but I do believe coaches are starting to learn that there's not one way just to scream and shout. And to be fair, the best coaches I had 20 or 30 years ago weren't the screamers and the shouters. And I've seen that over time. My coaching style was probably more technical and relationship built, but I love that. But my assistant coach was nuts. He was genuinely nuts. And he's the coach of Georgia these days. And I've been coached by Eddie Jones here, if you know that name here. And yeah, he's nuts. So there are different ways to do it. But I do think that evolution, the Wayne Bennett's that have done it for 30 or 40 years, they have adapted. And I know Wayne really well, and his ability has always been about talking about his players and getting to know how they get better. Sure.
Thanks, Pat. I just wanted to ask what you see with the Play Well strategy, the role of the Sports Commission compared to the individual sports. I have 2 boys who are 9 and 7. They're playing league, and I'm really surprised by a lot of the behaviour from parents on the sidelines to refs to other children.
Yep.
You know, it seems like a lot of people have lost sight of the fact that it's a kids' game and you want them to have fun, and it's not about, it's pretty bad. And, in some grounds it's roped off because they don't want the spectators too close to the kids that are playing because of abuse or things like that. So I guess that's a fantastic strategy, Play Well, but how that filters down to
our coaching and officiating and the marketing around that will try and drive that collegiate. We will base funding, to get your funding and to be a recognised sport. One of the tick-off is around a Sport Integrity Australia. So you saw there were people that didn't go to the Olympics due to issues that had with coaching and relationships. There's been recent ones in volleyball and boxing, and these are all public, so feel free. It's going to take a long and sustained ability to be able to go, this is about fun. This is supposed to be fun. And the most likely thing, your kid is going to just have a great time with this. You think they're going to be elite, and that will take care of itself. That's not the challenge here. And as you heard, look, I live with the pressure of my father had played for Australia, my grandfather played for Australia, uncle played for Australia. I knew all that, and I was in the fifths in year 11. So I went from a nobody kid in year 11 school to playing for Australia in 3 years. Things change. And I had no pressure from my parents, none. I think getting the commission this is one of those ones that we're going to look for better over perfect, because you are not going to change every single person's behaviour on the side of it. What we can do is when that behaviour is seen, it's not tolerated. And that's going to have to be the real driving change on the ground, and to make it a participation pathway that gets great high performance outcomes. We've all got a little bit of competition in us. We've all got it. So, I don't think Jess Fox is going to change the way she competes just because we've got nice coaching styles. So I think I see no negativity to the high performance benefits of keeping more kids in sport having great experiences. And we've all seen what you've seen. And look, to be fair to even the big sports, they're going, we've all got to work on this. It's a real thing that's a problem to fix. And it's going to take some real people on the ground to make those decisions. And we're going to be able to help people to do that.
Thanks, Pat. Are you able to see this?
Questions, or would you like me to read them out?
I'm
Sorry.
now 6 months into this, and I'm not used to it. Righto. Please feel free to submit your questions. Okay, great. Be with you shortly. Where am I finding these questions?
Okay. Okay, I've got them. Amber Jefferson, who is up in our Executive Secretariat unit, said, thanks, Pat. What do you think are the biggest barriers to keeping people active? Which you've kind of touched on.
Yeah, so there's in this Play Well strategy, and I'm not going to strategy for strategy's sake, but a pet hate of mine is strategy sitting on a desk and collecting dust. I hate a brand new 10-year strategy. It kills me. Okay, so I will talk. Spaces. We are an incredibly urbanised country. So we are. If you're in WA, 80% of all people in WA live in Perth. So the ability to access the facilities is a problem. Cost of living, I think, is a significant problem. But I think us having a mindset that it doesn't have to be organised to be sport. And that's good. You know, if you want to go for a swim, you want to go for a run, that's sweet. You want to go for a bushwalk, great. You know, and I think life is going that way. Now, how our sports work with all those opportunities is going to be their challenge. And we're going to help fund them to do that, because we want to make sure that if a kid is skateboarding or surfing, if you're Surfing Australia, how do you get your best surfers back into some organisation? That's one of the great challenges. And they're aware of it and they're working on it. You know, we want you to enter this competition even though we've never seen you before, because we've talent ID and people spotting or skateboarding parks or cyclists going up Mount Hotham. We know there's a sport is getting decentralised, much like many things we deal with in life. I'm sure this is not a foreign decentralisation conversation. The old days of going to the hospital, and that's the only thing, my doctor's the only person I'm going to trust, versus the allied health places that we can get, or alternative health or all sorts of things. These are challenges that we've got to be able to embrace, to be able to think about how are people going to have a longer but also healthier life, physically and mentally. I think, so it's great that we've got a similar goal here, but they're the thing, we look at places and spaces, I think we look at cost of living, we look at people getting active with other people, and I think we're doing that relatively well as a country, but we are nowhere near where we were sort of in the 70s and 80s, when it was a lot easier just to join your local footy club and off you go, wherever the footy might be of the time. So I think that's the bigger things, the headlines.
So building
That one, are you able to elaborate on maybe some successful programs in remote and rural communities, given facilities can be hard to build and maintain? Because it's a similar struggle we have with healthcare.
Yeah, and look, it's a lot easier to build a volleyball court than it is to build a hospital at Catherine. So let's our barriers to entry are a little bit smaller than yours, but at the same stage, as a consequence, if you're running health, it's going to be more difficult, to see the sport aspect because we're little. There have been the significant amounts of sports where there's been, and you go to high performance because it's easy to do the crossover, but the beach volleyballer at the moment, she came through, a pathway was identified in Queensland and wasn't a volleyballer at the time. So she's from, I'm going to go Cloncurry. I could get this wrong, anecdotal stories, but became an Olympic silver medalist within 3 or 4 years. So we've seen that. We've seen the AFL, and part of the Sports Commission into the AFL, they do it, but they've got some big money to be able to drive that. I know Morris Longbottom's story, who's the Sevens player, is Indigenous player. His story's, very good about coming back in and working with a family and being able to come back in and out in his Sevens program. So there's lots of anecdotal stories in rural and I live in Queensland, which is the most decentralised state. So I often have to talk to Victorians. We have 8 Geelongs in Queensland, so eight population bases of 100,000 or more. It's an incredibly decentralised state. And what wins elections up there and effectively wins federal elections is, you've got an incredibly decentralised state, and having facilities in Townsville. The Townsville Stadium made a big difference to that complex. There was, because they've got more people involved in one singular sport, but then they've got 8 sports underneath that. So, and they've had some flow-on effects from those regional natures as well. So Gold Coast is another one. Gold Coast is a real hot spot. Gold Coast and Launceston are your best hotspots for talent. Wagga used to be, and they have a lot of facilities. So there's been a nice breeding ground of those. Sorry, have I done something?
That's me moving them.
And so hopefully that answers where those couple of opportunities have been.
We've got another question from Heather Swanson, who heads up our injuries unit.
I know Heather.
Yep.
G'day, Heather.
What personal legacy would you like to leave at the Sports Commission?
You heard the CV, so I'm really comfortable, and Kieran, I'll go to Kieran Perkins. Kieran's never going to be remembered for his role necessarily as the CEO of the Sports Commission. So the good news is, you come in, you make a difference, you make it better, you impact the people. Look, I love the fact I'd like the AIS in Canberra to be the central hub. I think it's really important. I think it'd be a waste of taxpayers' funds to go somewhere else, and there was reports on that. And to be able to bring teams together, because we are really good at individual sports at the moment, so it'd be really interesting for you to watch this, but we're not nailing it necessarily in teams. Teams have got to come together somewhere. So it's great that St Peter's School up in Brisbane, you know, it's got Ariana Titmus and it's got Malaya Callahan and it's got the 4x100, and so they're all living up there, and that's all cool. But we've got to bring our teams together. And look, if there's anybody really keen out there, we get automatic qualification in the Brisbane 2032 Olympics. Okay? So if you want to play flag football, if you want to get into lacrosse, let's get in the team. We'll get the green and gold on together. So it's so the legacy bit, it's getting our teams to lift. I would love to be able to help support and shift and work with other sports to get those teams to lift. I think the water polo team have really gone well above what we expected them to do, which is awesome. You know, it's a sport that sort of flies under the radar. You know, the Opals won this morning. I'd love to see those teams continue to grow, because team sport actually does a lot for the social connectiveness and social cohesion. There's a lovely flow-on effect about doing that. That would be my answer to Heather's point.
I think this might be a similar answer from what you've just said. What opportunities are available for people aged 60 plus who in life have not seriously been involved in sport before?
Well, pickleball ACT is the fastest growing sport, and everybody, and it's aimed at the 60 pluses, and I'm not surprised. And look, I think it's your data recently. There's more 50-year-olds now than 10-year-olds, and in Australia. So we're going to have to think about how we continue to be active long term. And so there are lots of sports, and you know, I'm 50 and I would be hoping to be cycling for as long as I can. I went for a run last night. I think there are the team sport aspect to keep active in that, walking, camping, yoga, but that sort of mindset post 60 is going to be really important. One of the things we're doing at the arena is actually opened up to the over 60s in that 10 to 2 period, because the baby boomer period, they're not working. When kids are at school and parents are in the middle of, you know, trying to make ends meet and deal with mortgages, the retirees, there's options there. And it's our dead period, so it's in terms of quiet. So I think more and more sports need to factor that in. A little less running, but a little bit of active, and so plenty of thought, as you can hear. Pickleball's not the only answer, but it is. I'm not surprised of its success.
Pat, we might close it off for now, if that's okay, because it is about...
I refuse. No.
Okay. So I just want to say thank you for, number one, making time in your busy calendar during the Olympics. It's a very special time, and we've got the Paralympics coming up, so some pretty inspirational athletes to see is still going. So I'll say thank you and hand over to Matthew.
Yeah, so thanks so much, Pat, for coming. A lot of great insights there. And look, we're already working with you guys, so we'll continue to do that, I'm sure. And there's lots more I could tell you and thoughts that come to mind, but I'll leave it there. So thanks again. We just put out a story. One of the positive things people are, as you know, exercising. Yeah. Not any more professionally.
Thanks, Nick.